This section is for priority passengers only. You need to move right now.
I am already in my seat.
Do not argue with me. You clearly do not belong here. Stand up immediately.
You are mistaken.
I said stand up. I am not going to repeat myself again.
And I said no.
You people always think you can sit wherever you want and know no rules!
This is not about rules, this is about misunderstanding.
Move to the back right now before I call security and have you removed.
You can call whoever you want.
You are refusing instructions on a private aircraft. Do you understand how serious this is?
I understand perfectly.
What happened on that private plane was a blatant abuse of power. As a flight attendant humiliated and assaulted a passenger she misjudged, but every act of cruelty has consequences. What she didn't know was that the truth was beginning to unfold, and what followed would reveal a horrific price she never imagined. And remember, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
The opportunity had come and gone. The aircraft door closed. The engines remained silent. Inside the cabin, tension thickened like gathering storm clouds. The main commercial terminals across the river were crowded with delayed flights, security lines, and impatient travelers. Teterboro was different. Here, luxury operated in silence. Black SUVs rolled up to private entrances. Pilots walked across polished tarmac carrying leather flight cases. Executives stepped onto waiting aircraft without ever seeing a boarding gate. Marcus Delroy Whitaker preferred it that way, not because he enjoyed luxury, because he valued time. The 52-year-old founder of Whitaker Aerologics Group stepped out of a dark blue pickup truck that looked more suitable for a construction foreman than a billionaire. The truck had nearly 143,000 miles on it. He had owned it for 8 years and refused to replace it. A young valet glanced at the vehicle, then at Marcus's faded gray hoodie. No recognition. Marcus smiled to himself. That happened often. He grabbed a worn duffel bag from the passenger seat and started toward the terminal entrance. The security guard at the door nodded politely. Marcus nodded back. Nothing more. That small exchange mattered to him. Years earlier, after selling his first logistics company for $87 million, a reporter had asked him what he considered the greatest measure of character. Marcus had answered without hesitation, "How you treat people who can't do anything for you." The quote had never appeared in the article, but he never forgot it. As his companies expanded across 31 states, Marcus developed a habit that puzzled his executive team. Whenever possible, he traveled without an entourage. No assistants, no security detail, no designer suits. He wanted to see the real version of people, not the version they presented to wealth. Inside the private terminal, a receptionist greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, sir." "Morning. Flying to Georgia?" "That's the plan." She handed him a visitor badge. Simple, professional, respectful. Marcus appreciated that. The meeting waiting for him in Savannah wasn't just another business trip. At 3:15 p.m. that afternoon, he was scheduled to sign a preliminary agreement for a logistics expansion project valued at approximately $352 per million. The deal would create more than 800 jobs across Georgia and South Carolina. But even that wasn't the biggest reason for the trip. Another meeting was scheduled immediately afterward. A confidential meeting. One that could make Marcus the largest shareholder in Summit Executive Aviation, the very company responsible for managing his private aircraft fleet. The irony of that fact would become painfully clear later. For now, he simply checked his watch and continued walking toward Hangar 8. The Gulfstream G700 sat waiting beneath the bright New Jersey sunlight. Its white exterior gleamed against the sky. The aircraft had cost approximately $65 million before custom modifications. Marcus barely noticed. To him, it was transportation, nothing more. As he approached the aircraft stairs, he reached into the pocket of his hoodie and removed a brown leather-covered cell phone. The leather case showed signs of wear around the edges. He tapped the screen, opened a recording application, pressed record. The timer began counting upward. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Then he slipped the phone back into his pocket. Nobody saw him do it. This wasn't paranoia. It was habit. Several years earlier, a service provider had falsely claimed Marcus threatened an employee during a contract dispute. The accusation collapsed when security footage surfaced, but the experience taught him something valuable. Documentation mattered. Since then, He recorded many interactions during inspections and business travel. Most recordings were never reviewed. Some were deleted within hours. This one would be different. 100 feet away, inside the aircraft cabin, 28-year-old flight attendant Rachel Monroe was checking passenger amenities. She carefully adjusted a blanket in one of the premium seats before consulting her checklist. Her movements were efficient, practiced, professional, but beneath that calm exterior, anxiety followed her everywhere. 3 nights earlier, she had received another hospital bill. The total balance now stood at $18,437. 22. Her 6-year-old daughter, Lily, had undergone corrective heart surgery the previous year. The operation saved her life. The debt threatened Rachel's future. Every paycheck already had a destination before it arrived. Rent, insurance, medication, hospital payments, groceries. There was never enough left over. Never. Rachel folded another blanket and glanced toward the front galley. Denise Caldwell stood there reviewing passenger manifests. The sight immediately tightened Rachel's stomach. Everyone on the crew knew Denise. Not because she was respected, because she was feared. During 14 years in private aviation, Denise had developed a reputation that somehow never appeared in official reports. Passengers complained. Employees whispered. Management ignored it. Rachel had seen it happen firsthand. She remembered a businessman from Chicago 6 months earlier. Denise had assumed he couldn't afford the charter. She remembered a retired black surgeon from Baltimore. Denise questioned his credentials repeatedly before discovering he owned the medical company financing the flight. There had been complaints afterward. Formal complaints. Nothing happened. Every time, nothing happened. And every time Denise grew a little bolder. Rachel hated herself for staying quiet. But fear was expensive. Losing her job would mean losing health insurance. Losing health insurance could mean losing her daughter's treatment. Some choices didn't feel like choices at all. The aircraft door opened. Rachel looked up. A man in a gray hoodie stepped inside, carrying a worn duffel bag. He looked calm, unhurried, ordinary. Rachel smiled. "Good morning, sir." Marcus returned the smile. "Morning." For a moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. But across the cabin, Denise Caldwell had already looked up from her paperwork, and the expression on her face changed. Not dramatically, not enough for most people to notice, just enough for Rachel to recognize immediately. She had seen that look before. The assumptions had already begun, and this time, the wrong passenger had just walked onto the wrong airplane. Rachel didn't know it yet. But before the day was over, she would face the most important decision of her life. A decision that would determine whether she remained silent one more time, or finally told the truth. Marcus set his duffel bag beside the wide leather seat near the front of the cabin and took a moment to look out the window. The morning sun reflected off the polished wing. Ground crews moved efficiently across the tarmac. A fuel truck rolled away from the aircraft. Everything appeared routine, exactly the way Marcus preferred it. He loosened his shoulders and settled comfortably into the seat. The owner's seat. Not that anyone looking at him would have guessed it. The gray hoodie had faded unevenly from years of use. The jeans showed signs of wear near the knees. His sneakers were clean but old. There was no luxury watch on his wrist. No designer luggage. No visible indicators of wealth. Just a middle-aged black man sitting quietly on a private aircraft. Across the cabin, Denise Caldwell watched him for several seconds. Her eyes traveled from his shoes to his hoodie, then to the duffel bag, then back to his face. Rachel noticed immediately. She felt her stomach sink. The pattern was beginning. Again, Denise closed the passenger manifest and started walking toward the front seating area. Not quickly, not aggressively, not yet. Years of experience had taught her how to disguise hostility as professionalism. That was part of what made her dangerous. She rarely exploded without warning. She escalated, one step at a time. By the time people realized what was happening, they were already on the defensive. "Good morning, sir." Her voice sounded pleasant. Marcus looked up. "Morning." Denise forced a smile. "May I see your boarding credentials?" Marcus blinked once. Private aviation rarely worked that way. Passenger identities were verified long before arrival. Still, he remained polite. "Is there a problem?" "No problem at all." The smile remained. "Barely. We just need to verify your authorization for this seating area." Marcus nodded. Everything should already be on file. It should be. A pause. But I'd like to see it anyway. Rachel froze near the galley. There it was. Step 1. Marcus reached into his pocket and handed over identification. Denise examined it. She already knew the name matched the manifest. Rachel could see that from where she stood. But Denise wasn't looking for information. She was looking for justification. After several uncomfortable seconds, Denise handed the identification back. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. Marcus placed it back into his pocket. Then he returned his attention to the window. That should have ended the interaction. It didn't. 3 minutes later, Denise returned. This time carrying a tablet. I believe there may have been a seating error. Marcus turned toward her. A seating error? Yes. She pointed toward the rear section of the aircraft. There are available seats in the back. Marcus looked where she pointed, then back at her. I'm comfortable where I am. The smile disappeared. Sir, those seats are generally reserved. For whom? The principal passenger. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. Instead, he simply asked, and who is that? Denise crossed her arms. The owner of the aircraft. Marcus nodded slowly. I see. Rachel looked down at the floor. She already knew where this was heading. 6 months earlier, Denise had done something similar to a retired cardiac surgeon traveling on a charter flight from Baltimore. The surgeon happened to be African American. Denise questioned his credentials 3 separate times before takeoff. When she later discovered he owned the medical technology company funding the flight, she blamed a clerical misunderstanding. Management accepted the explanation. Before that, there had been a Latino entrepreneur flying to Dallas. Denise insisted he wait outside the lounge, while other passengers entered freely. Another misunderstanding. Always a misunderstanding. The complaints accumulated. Nothing changed. Someone higher up always protected her. Someone always buried the paperwork. Marcus folded his hands calmly. Are you telling me I can't sit here? I'm suggesting that this seat isn't assigned to you. And how do you know that? Denise hesitated. Only briefly. Then she made her mistake. She answered the question she wanted to answer instead of the one she had been asked. Because passengers assigned to this section are generally informed beforehand. Marcus tilted his head slightly. I wasn't informed. Exactly. The logic made no sense. But Denise seemed satisfied with it. Rachel noticed something else. Marcus wasn't becoming angry. Most people would have. Most passengers would have demanded a supervisor by now. Marcus simply listened. The calmness seemed to irritate Denise even more. 10 minutes passed. Boarding preparations continued. The pilots completed final checks. Ground personnel moved around outside. The aircraft should have been preparing for departure. Instead, Denise remained fixated on one passenger. Marcus Whitaker, a man she believed didn't belong. Then came step 3. She returned once again. This time there was no smile. No attempt at courtesy. Sir, I'm going to need you to move. The entire tone had changed. Marcus looked up from a report on his tablet. Why? Because I've asked you multiple times. You've asked me questions. A few nearby crew members exchanged glances. Denise's jaw tightened. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. She had seen this exact progression before. Denise always became more aggressive when people remained calm. Calmness denied her control, and Denise liked control. Very much. Look, Denise said. I don't want to make this difficult. Marcus nodded. Neither do I. Then moved to the rear cabin. No. The answer came softly. Not loudly. Not defiantly. Just clearly. No. For a moment Denise seemed shocked. Not by the refusal, by the fact that someone she viewed as socially inferior had given it. The silence stretched. Then Denise leaned slightly closer. Her voice dropped. Not enough to avoid being heard. Just enough to sound personal. People need to know their place. Rachel's heart stopped. The words landed like a stone. Marcus stared at her for several seconds. The expression on his face didn't change. Neither did his posture. But something behind his eyes became very still, very focused. Then he simply said, I think everyone eventually does. Denise frowned. She didn't understand the answer. Neither did Rachel. Not yet. A few minutes later, a ground operations coordinator appeared at the aircraft door, carrying updated paperwork. The man stepped into the cabin, looked around, then his eyes landed on Marcus. Immediately his face changed. Recognition. Instant recognition. Rachel saw it. The coordinator saw it. Marcus saw it. For one brief moment it looked as though everything would finally be resolved. The coordinator started walking toward Marcus. Mr. Witt. Excuse me. Denise intercepted him. Fast. Too fast. She pulled him aside near the galley. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Rachel couldn't hear every word, but she saw the coordinator glance repeatedly toward Marcus. Saw him trying to explain something. Saw Denise shaking her head. Firmly. Aggressively. Finally, the coordinator looked uncomfortable, then embarrassed. Then he left the aircraft. Without speaking to Marcus, Rachel couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. The one person who appeared ready to clarify everything had been shut down before he could say a word. The opportunity had come and gone. The aircraft door closed. The engines remained silent. Inside the cabin, tension thickened like gathering storm clouds. Marcus sat quietly in the owner's seat. Denise stood near the galley watching him. Rachel felt trapped between them. And deep inside the pocket of a worn gray hoodie, a cell phone continued recording every second. The timer had already passed 14 minutes. Neither Denise nor anyone else on board realized that the most important witness on the aircraft hadn't spoken a single word yet. For nearly 2 more minutes, nobody moved. The cabin remained suspended in an uneasy silence. Marcus sat in the forward owner's seat, with his hands folded loosely in his lap. Denise stood near the galley pretending to review documents she clearly wasn't reading. Rachel continued arranging supplies that didn't need arranging. Everyone was waiting. The only question was for what? Outside, a baggage cart rolled past the aircraft. Inside, the tension continued to build. Then Denise made a decision. The wrong one. She marched down the aisle and stopped directly beside Marcus's seat. No greeting. No professionalism. No attempt to hide her frustration anymore. That's enough. Marcus looked up. I'm sorry. I've been more than patient. Her voice carried through the cabin. Several crew members turned their heads. Denise pointed toward the rear section again. You need to move. Now. Marcus remained seated. No. One word. Nothing more. The answer seemed to hit Denise harder than an insult. Her face reddened immediately. Excuse me. No. Marcus's voice never changed. I have every intention of remaining where I am. Denise laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really think you belong up here? The words hung in the air. Several people froze. Rachel felt her stomach drop. There it was. No more pretending. No more protocol. No more excuses. The mask had slipped. Marcus slowly met Denise's eyes. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Marcus asked a simple question. What exactly makes you think I don't? Denise opened her mouth, then stopped, because there was no safe answer. Every explanation she could give would expose exactly what she had been thinking since the moment Marcus stepped onto the aircraft. Instead, she chose anger. You're being disruptive. No. You're refusing crew instructions. No. You're delaying this flight. No. Each response came calmly, patiently, almost quietly. The more composed Marcus became, the more agitated Denise appeared. A dangerous combination. Rachel knew what came next. She had seen versions of it before. Not this extreme, but close. Whenever Denise lost control of an argument, she stopped trying to win it. She tried to dominate it. Denise suddenly reached down and grabbed Marcus's duffel bag. The movement was so abrupt that even Marcus looked surprised. What are you doing? You can collect this from the rear cabin. Before anyone could react, Denise yanked the bag into the aisle. The strap caught briefly against the armrest, then snapped free. The duffel hit the floor with a heavy thud. Several items spilled partially from the zipper opening. A notebook, a charger, a folder containing business documents. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Rachel instinctively took a step forward, then stopped. Fear rooted her feet to the floor. Marcus looked down at the bag, then up at Denise. His expression remained remarkably controlled. But Rachel noticed something new. Disappointment. Not anger. Disappointment. As though Marcus had hoped Denise would eventually stop, and now realized she wouldn't. That was unnecessary. Marcus's voice was calm. Denise folded her arms. Then move. No. The answer came again. Simple. Unshaken. No. Denise stared at him. The challenge was no longer about a seat, or a passenger, or a flight. It had become personal. And everyone knew it. The cabin temperature seemed to drop. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Nobody even pretended to work anymore. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation unfolding near the front of the aircraft. Then came the moment nobody expected. Marcus leaned forward. Slowly, deliberately, he reached toward the aisle to retrieve his fallen notebook. And Denise interpreted the movement however she wanted to. Perhaps as defiance. Perhaps as disrespect. Perhaps simply as an excuse. Whatever happened inside her mind lasted less than a second. Then it happened. The sound cracked through the cabin. Sharp. Sudden. Unmistakable. A slap. Denise's hand struck Marcus across the face. Hard. The impact echoed off the cabin walls. Time stopped. Nobody breathed. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. For one frozen moment, the entire aircraft seemed suspended outside reality. Marcus remained partially bent over, the notebook still near his hand, the red mark beginning to form on his cheek. And absolute silence everywhere else. A clock near the galley continued ticking. Tick, tick, tick. The air conditioning system hummed softly overhead. A pen rolled slowly across the floor, where it had fallen from the duffel bag. Nobody touched it. The stillness lasted perhaps 3 seconds. It felt like 30. Rachel felt her heart pounding inside her chest. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. Neither could the others. Even Denise appeared momentarily stunned by what she had done. But only momentarily. Then self-preservation took over. Fast. Very fast. She stepped backward, pointed at Marcus, and immediately began constructing a new reality. He assaulted me. The words came out loudly. Confidently. Almost rehearsed. Several crew members stared at her in disbelief. What? Rachel whispered. Denise pointed again. He stood up aggressively. No, he hadn't. He threatened me. No, he hadn't. He attempted to strike me. Everyone knew that was false. Everyone, including Denise. But she kept going. Because admitting the truth was no longer an option. The lie became larger with every sentence. I want airport security immediately. Nobody moved. Denise raised her voice. Now, one crew member finally picked up a radio. Rachel felt physically sick. The situation had crossed a line she never imagined. This wasn't rude behavior anymore. This wasn't discrimination anymore. This was a false accusation against a man who had done nothing except remain seated. Marcus slowly straightened. He touched his cheek once, then lowered his hand. No shouting, no threats, no anger, just quiet observation. The reaction confused everyone, especially Denise. Most people would have exploded. Marcus didn't. Instead, he looked directly at her and asked, "Is that the story you're choosing?" The question sent a chill through Rachel. Because Marcus didn't sound afraid. He sounded certain. Certain of something. Denise mistook that certainty for surrender. Absolutely. Marcus nodded once. Nothing more. Just once. Then he sat back down. That unsettled Rachel even more. Because people who are trapped don't usually look calm. People who know something don't. Outside the aircraft, sirens could already be heard approaching across the tarmac. Security vehicles. Coming fast. Inside the cabin, nobody spoke. The lie now existed. The accusation had been made. The damage was done. And Rachel Monroe found herself standing at the center of the decision she had spent years avoiding. If she told the truth, she could lose the job that paid for her daughter's medicine. If she stayed silent, an innocent man could become the victim of a lie she had personally witnessed. The sirens grew louder. Denise stood confidently near the galley. Marcus sat quietly in the owner's seat. And Rachel realized that within the next few minutes, she would have to choose which kind of person she wanted to be. The first security vehicle reached the aircraft less than 4 minutes later. Its flashing lights reflected against the polished fuselage as it came to a stop beside the boarding stairs. A second vehicle followed, then a third. Inside the cabin, nobody spoke. The atmosphere had changed. Not calmer, heavier. The accusation now existed as an official claim. And official claims had consequences. Denise stood near the galley, with her arms crossed. Her posture projected confidence. But Rachel noticed subtle cracks beginning to appear. The flight attendant kept adjusting her collar, kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other, kept glancing toward the aircraft door. Fear had entered the room. Denise simply hadn't admitted it yet. Marcus remained seated. Quiet. Patient. The red mark on his cheek was still visible. Yet somehow he appeared to be the calmest person on board. The aircraft door opened. 3 airport security officers stepped inside. Leading them was Senior Security Supervisor Daniel Reeves, 54 years old, former Air Force, known throughout Teterboro for keeping his emotions under control. He entered the cabin and immediately sensed that something was wrong. Very wrong. His eyes moved from Denise to Marcus, to Rachel, to the scattered items still lying near the aisle. Then back again. Nobody looked comfortable. Nobody except Marcus. Who made the report? Denise raised her hand instantly. I did. What happened? He became aggressive. Daniel listened. He refused crew instructions. Daniel nodded. He threatened me. Another nod. He attempted to physically assault me. Daniel finally looked toward Marcus. The billionaire met his gaze calmly. No anger. No panic. No attempt to interrupt. That caught Daniel's attention immediately. People falsely accused of assault usually reacted emotionally. Marcus simply waited. Denise continued speaking. He should be removed from the aircraft immediately. Daniel turned to Marcus. Sir, I'd like to hear your side. Marcus nodded. Of course. His voice remained steady. There is one thing I'd like you to do first. What is that? Verify ownership of the aircraft. The request seemed unusual, but not unreasonable. Daniel motioned toward another officer. The officer opened a tablet, pulled up registration records, entered several identification numbers. A few seconds passed. Then the officer stopped typing. His expression changed. Immediately, Daniel noticed. So, the officer looked up, then looked at Marcus, then back at the screen. His voice lowered slightly. You need to see this. Daniel stepped closer, read the registration information, and froze. For a moment he said nothing. Absolutely nothing. Then he looked slowly toward Marcus Whitaker. The same way someone might look toward a person they suddenly realized they had seriously underestimated. The silence became noticeable. Denise frowned. What? Nobody answered. What is it? Still nothing. Finally Daniel cleared his throat. Mr. Whitaker. The title landed like a stone. Rachel saw Denise blink. Once. Twice. Confusion appeared on her face. Daniel continued. According to federal registration records, this aircraft belongs to you. The cabin fell silent. Not ordinary silence. Complete silence. The kind that arrives when reality suddenly changes shape. Denise stared at Marcus, waiting for someone to laugh. Waiting for someone to correct the statement. Nobody did. Because it was true. Marcus folded his hands. Still calm. Still seated. Still saying very little. Daniel continued reading from the screen. Gulfstream G700. He glanced down. Registered under Whitaker Aerologics Aviation Holdings. Another pause. Majority owner, Marcus Delroy Whitaker. The words seemed to echo through the cabin. Rachel watched Denise's face lose color. The transformation happened in real time. Confidence, confusion, disbelief, fear. Yet even then, Denise refused to accept reality. No. The word came out automatically. Daniel looked at her. No. There must be a mistake. There wasn't. He told us none of this. Marcus finally spoke. You never asked. That answer hurt more than an accusation. Because it was true. Denise opened her mouth, closed it, then tried another approach. One final attempt to maintain control. I don't care who owns the aircraft. Several people stared at her. You don't. No. Her voice grew louder. What happened still happened. Daniel narrowed his eyes. What exactly happened? Denise pointed toward Marcus again. He threatened me. The statement sounded weaker now. Less convincing. More desperate. Daniel turned toward the crew. Did anyone witness the interaction? Nobody answered. At first, Rachel felt her heart pounding. The moment had arrived. The exact moment she had feared for months. Not just today. Months. She remembered the surgeon from Baltimore. She remembered the businessman from Chicago. She remembered every complaint that disappeared. Every time she stayed silent. Every time she convinced herself she had no choice. But she did have a choice. She always had. And now another innocent person stood directly in front of her. Rachel thought about Lily. About hospital bills. About rent. About insurance. Then she thought about the man sitting quietly in the owner's seat, with a handprint still visible on his face. The decision finally became simple. Not easy. Simple. Rachel stepped forward. The sound of her shoes against the cabin floor seemed louder than normal. Everyone looked at her. Denise's eyes widened. Almost immediately. Because she knew. She knew exactly what was coming. Rachel. The younger flight attendant swallowed hard. Then looked directly at Daniel Reeves. And spoke. No, sir. The cabin became still again. Rachel continued. Mr. Whitaker never threatened anyone. Denise's face went pale. Rachel. He never raised his voice. Rachel. He never touched her. Stop talking. Rachel ignored her. For the first time, since joining the company, she ignored her completely. Instead, she continued telling the truth. The whole truth. The insults. The accusations. The bag being thrown. The slap. Every detail. Every witness. Every minute. Denise looked ready to explode. She's lying. Rachel didn't stop. Mr. Whitaker was seated the entire time. She's lying. Rachel continued. He was reaching for his notebook when Denise struck him. She's lying. Daniel looked at Denise, then at Rachel, then at Marcus. Something wasn't adding up, and everyone knew it. Marcus reached calmly into the pocket of his hoodie, the same hoodie Denise had judged from the moment she saw it. He removed a brown leather-covered cell phone, the symbolic object that had quietly traveled through the entire incident. The phone, the recording, the witness that never forgot. Marcus held it up. I believe this may help. Nobody spoke. He touched the screen. Opened the recording. The timer displayed 27 minutes and 14 seconds. Daniel accepted the phone. Pressed play. The first voices filled the cabin speakers. Every accusation, every insult, every demand, every lie, recorded perfectly. No editing. No ambiguity. No escape. As the video continued, Denise's shoulders began to sag. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came the moment. The bag. The confrontation. The slap. The sound echoed from the speaker. Sharp. Clear. Undeniable. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The recording ended. Silence followed. Long, heavy. Final. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. Then looked directly at Denise Caldwell. For the first time since entering the aircraft, there was no uncertainty in his expression. Only certainty. Because the truth was now sitting in his hands. And Denise had just spent nearly 30 minutes helping to record it. The silence inside the cabin didn't break immediately after the recording ended. It fractured. Slowly. Like glass under pressure. Denise Caldwell stood motionless near the galley, staring at the floor where Marcus's duffel bag had been thrown earlier. The same bag she had kicked aside without hesitation. Now it looked different. Smaller. Insignificant. Dangerous in its own quiet way. Daniel Reeves finally handed the cell phone back to Marcus. His voice was measured, but the tone had changed. This changes everything. Marcus simply nodded. He didn't look satisfied. He didn't look angry either. Only finished. Rachel stood a few steps behind, still processing what she had just done. The truth had left her mouth, and there was no way to take it back. Denise suddenly laughed. A short, sharp sound. Uncontrolled. This is ridiculous. Nobody responded. She turned toward Daniel. You're seriously going to believe a recording over a trained crew member? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment, then spoke. We're going to secure the aircraft. Within 7 minutes, Denise Caldwell was escorted off the aircraft. Not dragged, not arrested, but firmly removed. Her ID badge was confiscated at the bottom of the stairs. She protested the entire way down. This is a misunderstanding. You're making a huge mistake. You don't know who I am. Nobody stopped walking. By 12:31 p.m., she was sitting in a small holding room at Teterboro Airport Operations Center. Still insisting she had been assaulted. Still denying the recording. Still refusing to accept what had already been proven. Meanwhile, Marcus remained on board long enough to give a single instruction to Daniel Reeves. I want her removed from every aircraft under your management. Daniel nodded. No hesitation. Understood, sir. 1 hour later, Summit Executive Aviation issued an internal emergency directive. Denise Caldwell suspended pending investigation. Access revoked to all aircraft operations. Immediate audit of all past complaints involving her conduct. But the real damage had not yet begun. Within 72 hours, Marcus Whitaker terminated Whitaker Aerologics's aircraft management contract with Summit Executive Aviation. Annual value, $12,384,000. Gone. No negotiation. No appeal. A single sentence in an email. Effective immediately, all services are terminated due to breach of operational trust and safety standards. The financial impact was immediate. Summit Executive Aviation lost 3 additional corporate clients within the same week. Executives attempted damage control. Too late. An internal audit was launched after pressure from Marcus's legal team and external aviation regulators. What they found was worse than expected. 17 formal complaints involving Denise Caldwell over 6 years. 9 cases involving racial or socioeconomic bias. 5 incidents of false incident reporting. Multiple internal notes marked resolved without investigation. At the center of it all was Victor Langford, the operations director, who had personally closed every file, every complaint, every warning. His defense lasted less than 1 meeting. I was protecting the company's reputation. That sentence became his downfall. Within 19 days, Victor Langford was placed on administrative leave. Douglas Mercer, CEO of Summit Executive Aviation, faced board pressure. 2 senior compliance officers resigned. Revenue losses for the quarter exceeded $38.6 million, and the company's insurance premiums doubled overnight. By the 3rd month, the story was no longer private. It had escaped aviation circles. Journalist Olivia Bennett published an investigative report titled, "The Private Jet System No One Talks About." The article went national within hours. It included the recorded audio, internal complaint logs, statements from former employees, evidence of repeated discrimination cases. Airports across the country picked it up. So did regulatory agencies. The FAA initiated a formal review into Summit Executive Aviation's operational oversight practices. Not just Denise Caldwell. The system. Within 5 months, CEO Douglas Mercer resigned under board pressure. Summit Executive Aviation entered restructuring under federal oversight. Mandatory anti-bias and conduct training became a legal requirement for all private aviation crews in 3 states. A civil aviation advisory panel proposed new federal guidelines for complaint transparency. The industry shifted. Quietly at first, then permanently. Denise's legal case moved faster than expected. The recording removed ambiguity. Prosecutors charged her with assault in the 2nd degree, false reporting, abuse of authority in a commercial aviation environment. During trial, she maintained the same defense. I was doing my job, even when the video played in court, even when the slap echoed through the speakers again, even when jurors looked away. She did not apologize. The verdict: guilty on all counts. 18 months supervised probation. Mandatory community service, 240 hours. Permanent aviation industry ban. Her employment history became a barrier to future work in hospitality. Every application ended the same way. Rejected. Rachel was called into HR 2 days after the incident. She expected termination. Instead, she was asked to sit. The investigation team had reviewed everything, including her statement, including the recording, including her hesitation. The lead investigator spoke calmly. "You understood what was happening." Rachel nodded. "But you chose to tell the truth." Silence followed. Her job was not terminated. Instead, she was promoted to Senior Customer Experience Lead, assigned to a newly created Internal Ethics Compliance Division, a role that did not exist before that day, but would exist going forward. Rachel did not celebrate immediately. That night, she sat in her apartment beside her daughter's hospital bills and cried for a long time. Not from relief, from realization. She had waited too long to speak. 4 days after the incident, Marcus held a private meeting in Atlanta. Present: aviation regulators, legal representatives, former industry executives. He announced the creation of the Whitaker Equity Aviation Initiative, a $10 million fund designed to provide legal support for victims of discrimination in aviation and hospitality, fund independent oversight of private airline complaint systems, protect whistleblowers within service industries. But Marcus did not stop there. He made one additional decision. Unexpected. He paused his planned acquisition of Summit Executive Aviation shares. The deal was off. For now, his statement was simple. I don't invest in systems that refuse to see people. The aviation industry didn't collapse. It adjusted. Policies changed. Training improved. Paperwork multiplied. But something deeper had shifted. Silence was no longer safe. And in airport terminals across the country, employees began asking a question they had never been empowered to ask before. What happens if I tell the truth? The story did not end with a verdict. It ended with what came after silence finally broke. 6 months later, Atlanta, Georgia. The Whitaker Equity Aviation Initiative operated out of a modest office building near Midtown Atlanta. No glass tower, no marble floors, just clean walls, open desks, and a steady stream of case files arriving every day. Rachel Monroe stood near a window overlooking the street below. In her hand was a folder labeled Case Intake Number 184, Newark Ground Services Complaint. Her name was now printed on internal documents as Senior Director of Customer Ethics Operations, a title that did not exist before her testimony. She still wasn't used to it. On her desk sat a small framed photo. Her daughter, Lily, smiling at the hospital after her final cardiac checkup. Healthy, recovered, alive. Rachel touched the frame briefly before turning back to her work. Denise lived in a small apartment outside Newark. The blinds stayed closed most days. Her phone rarely rang anymore. When it did, it was usually automated rejection messages from job applications. Her aviation license had been permanently revoked. The industry she once controlled in small, quiet ways had closed its doors completely. Sometimes she replayed the recording in her mind. Not the full truth. Only fragments. The sound of the slap. The silence after it. But she still told herself the same thing. I was doing my job. No one was listening anymore. Victor Langford's name appeared in 2 federal reports. One from the FAA compliance investigation. One from a civil oversight committee. He no longer worked in aviation, or anywhere adjacent to it. He now ran a small logistics consultancy in Ohio, the kind of business that never makes headlines, or decisions that matter. His career had not ended in a moment. It had dissolved across months of emails, depositions, and findings. Quiet, systematic. Final. Douglas Mercer stepped down as CEO of Summit Executive Aviation on a rainy Tuesday morning. There was no press conference. Only a written statement. I am stepping down to allow new leadership to guide the company forward. Behind closed doors, the board had been clear. The company had survived the scandal. Barely. But trust had not. He left with a severance package and a reputation that no longer carried weight in the industry. 6 months after the incident, Marcus returned to Teterboro Airport. Same terminal, same runway, different atmosphere. This time, he did not travel alone. A small group of advisors accompanied him. But something else had changed. He no longer carried his phone in his pocket while boarding. He placed it openly on the table before stepping onto the aircraft. The recording app was still installed, but it no longer needed to run. People were watching themselves now, before speaking, before acting, before assuming. The Whitaker Equity Aviation Initiative had already processed 312 discrimination complaints, 89 legal defense cases, 47 internal whistleblower protections activated, and every month, the number grew. Not because the system was broken in new ways, but because it had finally started being seen. On a quiet afternoon, Rachel met Marcus in a conference room overlooking the Atlanta skyline. No cameras, no press, just 2 people who had witnessed the same moment from different sides. Rachel spoke first. I almost didn't say anything. Marcus nodded. I know. A pause. I've met a lot of people who didn't. Rachel looked down. I used to think staying quiet was safer. Marcus replied without hesitation. Sometimes it is. That answer surprised her. He continued. But safety and right aren't always the same thing. Rachel didn't respond. She didn't need to. Later that day, Marcus boarded a different aircraft. The same brown leather-covered phone rested on the armrest beside him. The screen was off. For the first time, since the incident, it was not recording. A young flight attendant entered the cabin. She greeted him politely, respectfully, without assumption, without hesitation. Marcus nodded in return. Then he looked out the window. The runway stretched forward into open sky. Quiet, clear, unmarked. He placed the phone face down on the seat beside him, straightened it once, and leaned back as the aircraft began to move forward.